Because, of course, the fourth edition of the African Anti-Corruption Day has been commemorated by the Anti-Corruption Coalition in the Gambia on Wednesday. The event this year calls for fight corruption through effective and efficient judicial system. The Gambia has since 2005 been part of the 44 AU member states that have ratified the Convention on the Prevention and Combating of Corruption. More of that in this report.
In commemoration of the fourth edition of the African Anti-Corruption Day under the theme Fighting Corruption Through Effective and Efficient Judicial System, the Anti-Corruption Coalition in the Gambia observed that the process is generally slow. According to the organization, the prolonged formation of the anti-corruption bill that has lasted for 8 years and the lack of adequate resources for the judiciary were among the impeding factors to the attainment of a corrupt-free state. Abdoulaye Jadama, chairman of Anti-Corruption Coalition, alleged that the government had shown limited movements in policy actualization and implementation of anti-corruption commitment to the African Union.
The Gambia should take every effort to submit a periodic report, which is also another fundamental requirement that we fail in, and allow country visit by African Union Advisory Board in the coming year. The level of anticipated corruption is further taken for granted due to the fact that the government of the Gambia is not doing enough to investigate of public sector corruption from both civil society, the whistleblowers from media, public service, and international organizations. Clear example is the recent statement made by the current Minister of Health on massive cane of corruptions at the Ministry of Health.
Mar Nyang, a member of the coalition working group, asserts that it would have been more appropriate for the parliament to look into the anti-corruption bill before spending more resources on other errands.
So, always I keep saying, hadn't been we have the Anti-Corruption Commission, then we will not be talking about these commissions, spending millions of dollars into these commissions. The Anti-Corruption Commission, the anti-corruption bill has been at the National Assembly for a while now. In 2019, I think the president said the anti-corruption commission should be, not the president, the Minister of Finance. During the budget speech, he made mention that the anti-corruption commission should be in operation by end of 2019. So come 2019, we have not seen the anti-corruption commission being enforced, but the bill was passed in early December 2019. To date, we have been seeing bills that have been going in and out of the National Assembly, and that the Finance and Public Accounts Committee is still looking into that anti-corruption bill.
The Gambia has since 2005 been part of the 44 member states of the African Union that rectified the Convention on the Prevention and Combating Corruption. The West African state has made strides in the fight against corruption, which is attested in the reformation of the criminal codes and procedures and the commissioning of the Jana Commission to probe into assets under the former president of the Gambia. For iAfrica TV News, Awa Makalu.
Yes, thank you very much, Hawa Makalo, there for the report, and for, of course, for more discussion on that matter, and of course for better, maybe, so of course we would want to digest more on the matter of corruption in the Gambia, and for that regard, we are pleased to say we are joined by Mar Nyang, Executive Director of Gambia Participate, of course, who also was part of the commemoration yesterday, and I believe part of the Anti-Corruption Coalition in the Gambia as well. Mar, thank you very much for joining us this morning to shed light or more light on this on the commemoration, but also on the corruption level in the Gambia. First, we welcome you to the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and then share the recent statement that we made yesterday at the Anti-Corruption Coalition Gambia regarding the commemoration of the 4th edition of the Africa Anti-Corruption Day.
All right, 4th edition commemorated yesterday. First, I will ask you, as somebody concerned about corruption matters, especially in the Gambia, or Gambia in particular, tell us the level of corruption in the Gambia. How concerned are you?
Well, I keep saying the level of corruption in the Gambia is underreported, is underestimated, and it's also underinvestigated. I mean, we have a very systematic corruption that is in the public sector, which is retarding development in all sectors. I mean, if you to drive
today around in the morning and then look at the markets, you will see poor people, you know, I would just call them poor vendors, working and then spreading their goods on the floor, and then they're paying tax. So the area council are supposed to make sure they give them a good marketplace, enough space for them to be able to sell goods that will be healthy for people to eat. That's something that we need to concern about. So I think what we also fail to understand is that of the human cost of corruption. When it happens at the public sector level or at the highest level, how does it really affect the lives of the people?
Okay, I will interject here quickly because, of course, talking about corruption is not a new thing in the Gambia. From the Fourth Republic to now, Gambians have been talking about corruption. Gambians have been told about corruption, but as a concerned somebody about corruption status in this country, tell us about the proofs or the evidences. What are these corruptions about, and how do they occur? Sometimes people want to know, and sometimes one might say, you might say there and say corruption is up there, but how does it happen? Where are the evidences? How do people know that there are corruption? Of course, people talk about it, but sometimes it's difficult to prove that. Yeah, these are the things that we talk about.
I totally agree with you that sometimes it is very difficult to prove it because the fact is with the government, and the government failed to give the information to the people for them to be able to hold them accountable. So there are gazillion of alleged public sector corruption. One coming from the highest, to call it ministry in this country, that is the Ministry of Health, the highest officer, which is the Minister of Health himself, alleging the public sector corruption in his ministry. And in fact, before that, we also made an investigation into the COVID-19 fund, and then a report called Corona the Gambia and the Millions was published. And exactly what he said, we already published that 2 weeks prior. And then you also look at the current report that comes from the Environmental Investigation Agency, EIA, published June 3rd, 2020. They have also reported that the Gambia has underreported $471 million in regards to illicit timber trade, and then it is involving top government officers who are ministers right now, currently serving the government, and they have bypassed their position, allowing the illicit transportation of timber. And then there is an investigation video, how to call it, a secret video, making, you know, the Gambians were those that are involved in it, saying that that particular minister was part of it. So you also look at how to call it, the current tourism scandal. We have seen the documents, right? Those documents are enough to prove that there is massive abuse of power, facilitating the awarding of contracts to a higher bidder, which is not acceptable. And GPPA also made a recommendation that an independent firm should be able to look into that particular procurement and then give an estimate. An independent firm did the work, and then they gave, how to call it, the amount, and then they say that the one that the highest bidder bid is too much, and they end up giving the contract to that person. So
these are kind of the concerns that you have.
I mean, they are not. They are concerns. I mean, we've seen massive abuse of power, personalization of public office in order to personalize public wealth.
Okay, I know we'll come back to the anti-corruption bill, which I had to mention in the report. But before then, you talked about government, of course, not giving out information, and that probably might talk about transparency. And recently, we have seen the U.S. government, of course, clapping or approving Gambia's progress in terms of giving out relevant information and transparency. What do we say to that?
Yeah, so if you look at that U.S. report, it says Gambia has made significant progress in budget transparency, but Gambia has not met the minimum requirement for budget transparency. And what is minimum requirement? Minimum requirement here means the Gambia should be able to make so the top budget documents are published.
But at least there are some clause for the government.
Yeah, definitely. I have been, if you go on our Twitter, we've been also clapping for the Ministry of Finance. We also closely work with the Ministry of Finance because recently we've seen them uploaded the approved budget, and then they've also developed a more simplified citizens budget, and then the monthly expenditure report is also published on time. So these are some of the things that we've been advocating at the Ministry of Finance, and they've been complying to what we've been advocating. So they are really cooperative in comparison to other ministries. So they are making progress, to be honest, right? They're making progress towards making so we have a budget transparency but we still have a gap to fill, and the gap to be filled is not only with the Ministry of Finance. You have the National Audit Office, who is supposed to make sure that the audit reports are published on time, and by law they're supposed to audit public accounts 6 months after. They're supposed to publish the public audited accounts 6 months after the financial year, which is hardly done. Right now we're talking about the 2018-2019 reports. So these are some of the things that should be done in order for Gambia to meet how to call it, the minimum requirement. But we've been making significant progress.
All right. Many also believe, as you probably may know, that of course the way to fight or to eradicate corruption in the system, probably it would be not easy, but then is about having an institution that looks or concern or deals with the corruption. That is the Anti-Corruption Commission. And of course the bill, I believe, is at the National Assembly. Like I said, I heard you mention about that. What do you think is deterring the progress of having the Anti-Corruption Commission set? Of course, the bill is at the National Assembly, but you know it looks it's taking long more time than it needs. And what position do you think government is taking with, or is showing to see that the commission is instituted?
So the executive has taken up the initiative in making sure that they table the anti-corruption bill at the National Assembly, I think 2nd of December 2019. So the Finance and Public Accounts Committee are looking into the bill, and we, the civil society organization, invited the media, and then we look into the bill and it makes recommendation that there are certain provisions in the bill that are supposed to be amended, because if not, it will weaken the independence of the Anti-Corruption Commission.
Okay.
So it was supposed to be debated March, but because of COVID, they postponed the the debate on the Anti-Corruption bill.
Yeah.
And then in these sittings, I think there are also certain things that have distracted the focus with all the COVID that is coming, and then other bills that have been passed. But for me, I believe one thing that they should prioritize is that of the anti-corruption bill, because right now the corruption that is going into this country is just unacceptable.
So you are concerned about the progress it's taken?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the records, Gambia has not been making significant progress. We have not made significant progress towards fighting corruption. If you look at the Corruption Perception Index that was published by the Transparency International, we are the 93rd least corrupt country out of 180 countries around the world. So that tells a lot about how corruption is actually evolving in this country. It is always on the increase, but not on the decrease.
Wow, that's a big concern. And again, like I say, many might be watching and say, Gambia, they will just only do the talking, because you sit here and talk about corruption. They do this, they do that. But of course, like I asked you earlier, of course, the evidence is, to make people believe that you would have been probably good, and you come and say Gambians, look, this is one of the things or two that we have, and these are proof. Of course, you mentioned the Minister of Health, who said there were some malpractices in his ministry and all that. But that alone, I don't think it's enough. As an activist or as a concerned people, it might be also important sometimes you come with proofs and evidences to the people to know exactly this is what we are talking about. I know you have a concern, and again,
and
people are talking about it.
Yeah, we did that. We published our report, and then all the facts are stated in that report. We in fact sent it to the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, National Audit Office, and National Assembly for them to look at that document and then subpoena documents.
Is that enough, you think? You should, you think you should do more efforts?
Yeah, we should definitely do more. And then I think where our challenge is, whenever we're conducting our investigation, who have the facts, the government, you write to them requesting for those documents, they never reply back. So that tells you the lack of transparency. And then you cannot remove corruption when there is lack of transparency in the public sector. So that lack of transparency in fact raises eyebrows, right? They have the documents, give us the documents, and then let's help you be better. Let's help you to make sure you are more efficient. Let's help you to make sure that the people receive a better public service delivery. But this is the challenge. So that's the reason why we engage National Assembly, and they have the mandate and to subpoena the documents. Those so called officers, we also have the ombudsman. By law, they are supposed to investigate public sector corruption.
Yeah. Just to sum it up, of course, finally, before we let it go, how dangerous and serious is corruption for the development of this country? You talk about it's deterring the progress of development. How serious it is in this country?
I will tell you the seriousness of corruption is costing lives, and then people fail to see that, and that's what we call the human cost of corruption. And I will give you one example before I leave. If 100 million is being appropriated for the construction of roads, right, and then 80 million has been used as a, let's say, for the development, 20% as 20 million as kickback, that 80 million is insufficient to build a good road. So if you build a bad road, you have potholes, and then cars will drive, and then there will be an accident. Who causes the accident? Is it the car or the one who stole the money from? And then that particular patient that has actually, the victim that has died or the one that has been affected, you take him to the hospital and there's insufficient materials to cure that person. So who is the reason behind all that?
All right, it cannot be better than that. But before we go, yaa ngi reede saa lu ma wax ni xalaas fekkee am nga benn laaj nga koy laaj rek balaa moo dem pour mu gën a leeral tamit yëf yi ñuy seetaan tamit ñu xam lu ñuy wax mooy affaire corruption njuuj njaaj ci réew mi mu nekk lu nga xamante ne concern la.
waaw lu doy waar la njuuj njaaj ci réew mi waaye comme si lu mujjee rek. because exemple bu mu joxee wax na dëgg because suñu demee ba nga xam ne ni am na ku jël si lu waroon a tax yoon bi garanti kon ku jël loolu moo cause accident bi by all but lu ma laaj rek mooy am na moo wax na ne dañoo jël seen report yóbbu jox ko government pour duñ dee am tontu si ñoom parce que loolu su ma la déggee dafa mel ni kon ñoom corruption bi dafa mel ni bu fekkee mu ngee dox si bureau bi ñoom tam am na luñ si jàppa
comme man lu ma doon waxee rek foog naa ñu bëri seen loxo moo tilim si wàllum njuuj njaaj moo tax gars yi du ne nangoo jël matuwaay pour make sure ne there is accountability because ñoom bu gars yi demee war a use keneen pour ne dañu call for accountability kooku dina back fay mu jox leen information ne yow tamit bokk nga si système yi boo xoolee report bu National Audit Office def si embassy bu nekk UK gis nañ fa massive corruption waaye la gars yi dañ génnee kooku noonu so génnee loolu nekkul accountability mooy nga teg ko si yoon kooku noonu mu face kon boo xoolee wàllum China ñooñu dañ na dee sentence life in prison loolu as a serious because dañ ko dencee corruption as a serious matter waaye fii nii nag ñun suñ government bi is not serious ñu pour fight corruption loolu moo tax dañ jox boobu noonu space gars yi normalise corruption ba pare loolu tax corruption di dëgg gannaaw dem kanam te ku nga xamante ni ngay receive ay less than 1 million in a year ñooy am ay mansion of worth $10 million so loolu nekk na li nga xamante dafa garaaw.
alright xam naa nañ gën a yaatal waxtaan bi.
waaw because it's a very important.
Definitely Matar Mar Nyang sorry executive director bu Gambia Participate, thank you very much for your time and it was good to have you.